So hi, David Gordon, Marketing Expert Series. We're very lucky today to have Jazz Blakeston Petch from Dominoes, who was an ex-student of De Montfort University. So Jazz, hi, good afternoon. Great for you to be on today, and thank you very much for offering your input and expertise. I just want to start off, Jazz, just by talking you to talk about yourself. Tell me a bit about yourself, your learning, your career journey.
Sure, yeah, thanks, David. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share some of my experience. So I suppose if we go back to kind of like a relevant life story, if you like. So I graduated from De Montfort University in 2014 with a degree in marketing management. And I'll talk you through a bit around what's happened since then and kind of where I've ended up now, which is head of digital product at Dominoes Pizza here in the UK. I think the point that I'd like to start off with is often people might think that career trajectories are often like a straight line and up to the right. So to give a bit of an example, when I was at De Montfort studying for my degree, actually the bit that most interested me was the kind of digital marketing, advertising and social media element. And I kind of always had in my head that actually what I'd do after university is I'd go work at an agency, maybe go and work for a big agency, and kind of had these dreams of maybe being like creative director and that kind of thing. And I've almost gone in an opposite direction, and that's absolutely fine. So yeah, it's kind of been a bit of a squiggly line, if you like, as opposed to something that's a straight trajectory. I think one of the things that really helped me was that I took the opportunity to take advantage of a placement scheme when I was at De Montfort University. That was the most important thing because that gave me the chance to figure out what I actually enjoyed doing in kind of like a real live work environment. So I went and worked for a medium-sized agency called Rock Kitchen Harris in Leicester. I ended up doing quite a broad amount of stuff. So I got to do the social media bit, did a lot of CRM. I was an account manager as well. So I got to do some of the traditional advertising stuff. And actually what I learned there was actually I wasn't that interested in the social media bit. But what I did really start to like was the digital advertising and the kind of more, I suppose, user experience, so website and apps. And that was kind of what really sparked my interest. And kind of when I was at university, I kind of had this vision that, oh yeah, I'd go and work for kind of like a big agency eventually and that kind of thing. And actually, when I worked at RKH, there's lots of great stuff about working at an agency. So I love the kind of variety and the kind of experience that I got there. But if I'm honest, some of the bits that did frustrate me a little bit was, I suppose, sometimes the relationship between you as an agency trying to recommend stuff and a client. And often what I found was I liked that variety, but it meant you only kind of dipped in and out of projects. And I kind of wanted to work somewhere where I could kind of a bit more long term. And also the work-life balance, if I'm honest, can be crazy sometimes at agencies, like if you speak to anyone there. But that's the kind of lifestyle, right? It's a bit of, they've got that reputation for work hard and kind of play hard on that side. So then I came back to uni. That gave me a lot of focus then because I kind of had a clearer idea about the type of stuff that I enjoyed. I actually went back to that agency as well after I did my placement year. So that was great because I kind of, in my final year, they already kind of offered for me to come back. So I kind of secured a graduate role there. And then when I came back again, they kind of wanted me to do this social media stuff because that's what I'd started off in, but I kind of knew in my heart that wasn't what really interested me. So then that's when things started to change a little bit, really. I had the opportunity to go and work for Camelot, who operate the National Lottery. Actually got a friend who went to DMU as well, and his first job post uni was going off to work at Camelot, and he recommended that to me because I had that interest in digital marketing. I started off in the customer relationship management team, and that was really just as a email marketing exec. So I was responsible for kind of the email marketing campaign. So at university, thinking about all the segmentation stuff that we've learned before, so you kind of active customers, what products they buy and that kind of stuff, and then tailoring the email comms based on that. And then I'd probably say, I think one of the themes I'd like to, or one of the prompts I'd tell students is that it's just try and seize as many opportunities when they came up. So the first one at DMU really was that placement year. That opened up so many doors because I got that real life experience, which gave me that standout, if you like. Then when I was at Camelot, they did a thing where they gave you a chance to spend a day on whatever you wanted on personal development, which is quite rare for some companies. And again, going back to when I was at the agency, I was interested in the kind of website side of stuff and the apps and that kind of thing. So I had a chance to spend some time with a digital product team that look after the kind of website and build all the apps. And I spent a day with them, and I was like, oh, I really like this world because it's really problem kind of focused and orientated. So solving problems for customers in the business. And I took a bit of a leap because one of them gave me a bit of a chance, really. They had a role in the team that they'd been struggling to fill for a little while. And I spent a day with the hiring manager, Claire, who took me through kind of what the team did, and I was really interested. And she said, look, do you want to come and join my team? I felt like I had made a bit of a mistake because I'd only been there for 6 months. So I got a bit of a telling off from my hiring manager because he was like, oh, did you come in and, did you not really want this job and that kind of thing? And I explained, no, it wasn't. It was just that I suppose, I'm kind of quite early on in my career and I'm still trying to figure out where I want to go. And I was just honest with him and I just said, look, this seems really exciting. So I'd like to move. And we came with a compromise, which is I stayed in that role a little bit longer to help them out, but then I could switch across and move over. And again, it goes back to that. It's a bit of a squiggly line, and it's okay if you don't figure it out from day one, but you just have to, if you've got an opportunity to go and spend some time with another team because you're interested in something, it's all about taking that kind of thing. And then after Camelot, so once I'd started to learn the ropes in this kind of like product management role that I'd started to take on, and when we go through our practical example, I'll really bring to life what that means kind of day to day. But at Camelot, I started to get a little bit frustrated because they're a heavily regulated business because it's essentially gambling, which meant that a lot of the kind of changes and innovation you wanted to do, you'd have to get past the Gambling Commission, which are a government body that approve certain things and within the boundaries of the lottery license. And that just meant that I was looking at some startups and some other places, and I was thinking, a lot of these people are managing to get stuff out faster and faster. And early on in my career, I wanted to have a lot more under my belt and learning my craft, if you like, at this kind of level. So in the end, with the first boss that hired me into product, he'd gone to Dominoes, and then kind of 6-7 months in, he gave me a call and said, Jazz, would you be interested in coming over to Dominoes to work with me? And then, I took the leap because Dominoes is known for its technical innovation. And it's quite fast paced. So I took a bit of a leap there. But I think the point to call out there is I met a lot of great people at Camelot, and when people had moved on that I had a good relationship with, I always still stayed in touch, even if it was just drop them the odd message on LinkedIn. It just always meant that when opportunities come up, they think of you, and often they'll go, oh, this thing's come up, or a recruiter's contacted me. It's quite hard to start up your network to begin with, especially if you're a graduate and you're starting from a bit of a blank slate. But once you start to build up that network, just make sure you treat it a bit like a garden. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but you kind of got to water it and stay in touch with people, because it's probably one of the best assets you'll have as you grow throughout your career. Sorry, I'm conscious I've rambled through that a little bit. I don't know if you've got any questions.
No, that's fantastic, Jazz. Exactly, wanted just a summary of you learning and career so far. So, Jazz, in the broadest sense, I've asked you to look at and what you've done and the activities you've driven and been responsible for and your experiences, and try and think about relating that in some way to the broad marketing curriculum that we're teaching at De Montfort. So over to yourself.
Great. So what I'm going to start off with is a bit of an explanation about kind of what is product management, because basically what I've kind of understood is this kind of role, either people come into this role, they come from a marketing and business background, they might come from like a design user experience background, which is when you open an app, how are those screens designed, how do customers use them, and some of the research there, or you come from a computer science technical background, and then people want to get into that kind of more strategic business side. So I'm going to share a couple of slides and hopefully give you a view of kind of what product management is and kind of what my role looks like day to day. And then I'll talk through a practical example. So you're going to have to bear with me while I do that awkward screen sharing thing, and see if you can see it properly. So I'm going to, if I share screen one, hopefully you can see a pizza thing. If I share my screen now, can you see that full screen? What is product management?
Yes, got it. Thank you very much.
Cool. So the easiest way to kind of distill it down is my world comprises of three areas, if you like. So you've got the business area. So that is all the kind of strategic side. So that is about prioritizing what problems we should be focused on. And an example of a problem, if I give you a couple of real life examples that Dominoes are facing into the minute. If we think about COVID specifically, now that a lot more of our competitors are going onto the aggregators, so people like Just Eat, from a franchisee operating perspective, that means that really they're competing a lot more for delivery drivers. And because the increase in competition has gone up, that presents challenges around retention and also cost, because obviously if there's more competition in the labour market, it means that wages are going to be more favourable for the delivery drivers. So we've really got to kind of up our game to kind of retain the people. And what that means on a knock-on impact for the business is that franchisees will have a challenge around costs and profitability for their business, right? If they're paying more for each delivery, but also from a customer experience perspective, because Domino's has always been known as a brand that will get you your pizza really quickly, and we've built up this reputation as Domino's being really reliable. You know, it'll be consistent every time, and it will deliver fast. And obviously that starts to build some outward pressure. So, you know, we have to think about, okay, well, that's a problem, and we're gonna have to start thinking about how we'd solve it. But then when you start thinking about, well, you've got these business challenges and these problems, well, how do you actually go about and solve them? So I kind of sit in the middle of the business strategic side, which is let's make sure that we know what the problems are and they're prioritized, so we're focused on the right stuff. Then I work with the user experience team. So they're the people that actually design the kind of interfaces, the look and feel for an app, and they're really responsible for making sure that kind of whatever solution we come up to these problems are actually easy to use for customers. So if I try and anchor it back to that example there where I talked about the challenge around drivers, well, if one thing is about retention and recruitment, what if we built an app that made it way easier for someone to apply for a job? Or what if we made it easy for them to kind of be a bit more flexible with Dominoes? So if they are going to work with other people, how do we know that they're available to come and work with us? And how do we build an app for them that would basically enable that? And then on the right, we've got the technology side. So the technology side is all about what's actually the kind of art of the possible. And I have to bring kind of all of these three things together to solve the kind of problem and make sure that we launch a viable solution. And I'll talk a little bit about what a viable solution is later on to solve those problems, essentially. The other key part of the role then is going, well, if we know that there's problems, we have to come up with a strategy and a way of delivering them. So I'm also responsible for managing the roadmap on the customer experience facing side. So out of all these problems, so you might go, a theme could be, for example, if you look at this here, would be this challenge and this problem around the delivery labour market. But there's also some themes, and I'll talk through a practical example around the customer experience around getting a discount. And there's countless other stuff that, you know, that crops up in the business that we could focus on. And my job is to make sure that we're focused on the right stuff now to solve the problems that are really important to us. Hopefully that kind of makes sense as a brief introduction. I don't know if you've got any questions around that, David, or if you want me to just go through the next step.
That was great, thanks, Jazz. As a lot of students may understand when they go into a marketing sphere on the agency side, there are specific roles, but also on the client side, it will typically be product management, service management, category management. So no, that's a brilliant summary, and I like the way that you've summarized it in terms of a service, that there isn't a product per se, but you are providing a service. So no, Jazz, back to yourself.
Cool. So now what I'm going to talk through is just a little bit around, great, so we've got these problems, right? And then you will naturally go from a problem space to a solution space. So how do you solve that problem? I think actually what I'm going to talk through now will give you an idea of what my role is day to day anyway, but also if you've got an idea about an app, for example, or a business that you want to do anyway, chances are that's going to have a big digital element to that. So I'm hoping that I can also share some tips, or at least give you some ideas about what you might want to explore if you wanted to launch something yourself. So if I talk about, okay, so we've gone from that identifying a problem, and it's always important to start off with what's the problem we need to solve. Well, you found out that problem. The kind of old school way was that you would come up with a load of ideas and then you'd build a solution and you would launch the solution to market. And the kind of old school way was that you would identify a problem, spend loads of time building it, and then you'd kind of cross your fingers and launch it. However, spending months or even kind of years building something and then launching it in kind of a big bang, if you like, is often a recipe for disaster. And it doesn't have to be that way, especially for software and e-commerce. You know, it might be a bit different if you're building an iPhone and you're going to have those timelines, but there is ways that you can reduce that risk. So when I talk about risk, so a big part of my job is understanding what the risks are in this process, and then what our assumptions are as well, to make sure that we're validating them early on. So to bring that to life, if you, I don't know, if we think about just typically, you'd go, well, there's a value risk. So what's the value risk? It's that your customer will actually pay for your product, or they'll choose to use it. So in a Dominoes context, for me, the choose it bit is kind of, will they use our app, and will they use the features there? Then you've got that usability element, which is, will customers actually find it easy to use, and will they have a positive experience? And I think we all know what, you know, if you think about brands like Airbnb that make it kind of really easy to book somewhere, and those type of experiences, if you compare them to, I don't know, maybe someone a bit more old school like Expedia, who are, when you go to the website, it's quite complicated and there's tons of option. It's all about that usability. So how do you make it easy to use, and will customers have a positive experience? The other bit is around feasibility. So that key bit is, can we build it in the time and the skills and with the technology that we have? So it's all great having an idea, but ultimately, if you're not going to have the time, you're not going to have the money to build it in that time period, that's a huge risk. And what you don't want to do is come up with an idea and start building it and do loads of work, and then at the end realize that you run out of time, or actually the technology isn't fit for purpose, and you've burnt all of that time with that risk built in. And the last one is business viability. So that is that the solution will work for the various aspects of the business and generate commercial value. And maybe if I try and think of an example in our context. So in Milton Keynes, we've got these little delivery robots that are being trialled at the minute. And we might go, great, well, would customers choose and pay to use that service? So at the minute, you can order from a co-op and they'll put your shopping in a robot, you give it your address and it arrives outside and you can open it. The app that they have is super easy for them to use, right? So usability, customers will find it easy to use and have a positive experience. I've ordered this stuff, it's great when it rocks up. Feasibility, well, someone already has the technology there, so I don't have to go away and build an autonomous robot. And actually we could integrate with them, there'd be some work there. The big bit is the business viability. So the solution, will it work for the various aspects of our business? So that would be like, okay, well, on a practical level, can I put a pizza in the robot? Is it big enough? Is it going to keep it hot? Also, is it going to generate that commercial value? So what's the amount of time it takes to load these robots? Is that going to cost extra money for franchisees and staff costs? But also, what's the cost to deliver? Because you can only probably fit like one pizza or one order in a robot, for example, where someone in a car could maybe take 3 orders, as an example. And so my job is really, how do you think through all these risks and try and solve them early on? And I'll talk about that next. So that was the kind of old school way of doing everything, where you just come up with an idea, you'd spend loads of time, you'd build it, and then you'd launch it. And actually, the better way is to understand and be really clear on where you've made those assumptions about value, usability, feasibility, and business viability. So the better way to do it is think like a scientist. And you know, we did a research module at DMU, which was really useful because that gave me a grounding in, I suppose, customer research methodologies. And it's important to think like a scientist because your chances of nailing something first are really low. And kind of what does thinking like a scientist mean? It means, well, you use data to make data-informed decisions, right? And you create and test hypotheses. And by creating them and testing them early on, before you spend loads of money on a project, takes out that risk and is more likely for you to have success. So I can't remember, David, you might have to chime in with a bit of a stat here, but off the top of your head, what percentages of startups or new businesses fail?
98%, 95, 98%.
It's like that 98%, right? So if 98% of people fail, well, your best bet is to think like a scientist and try and get as much data as you can to be data informed and test a lot of stuff cheaply as you go along. And I'll try and explain a little bit more about that as well. And then the other element is don't wait, don't build something for years and then release it in a big bang. What you want to do is think about, okay, well, if I've got an idea for a feature or I want to launch something, what's the smallest bit that you could get in front of customers early on so they start getting value from it, and also you can start making money from it. You don't have to build everything in one go. You build it iteratively, and if you get that out early and often, that means you get that feedback and you get that learning. So really what this translates to is you start with a problem, you come up with ideas, you build something as quickly and as possible, really, and as cheaply as possible, that's your solution, that's your product. You launch it in the world, right? And then you measure it with data, and you use metrics and KPIs. And then once that's out in the wild, that's where you get some learning, and then you can start to iterate off it, and reduce that risk. So if I use a really basic example of a problem, right, which is, if you strip it right back, which is what do you use a car for? You use it to get from A to B. Well, if the problem is actually I want to get to A to B faster than walking, there's different ways that you could do it. So here's an example. You could use a skateboard, you could use a scooter, you could use a bike, you could use a motorbike, and you could use a car. In the old school way, you might spend 2 years getting to the step number 5 where you build a car, when actually there'll be a whole proportion of customers that only need to nip down the shop down the road, but they want to get there faster. So actually they could get by with a skateboard and a scooter, and you could you could charge them for renting a scooter as an example, or whatever the business model would be. But that means that you've got something out early, you can start getting feedback from customers, and you don't have to build the ultimate solution in one go, and you build up that complexity as you go until you reach the full thing. But that means you can learn and you can make money as you go. Hopefully I've done an okay job at kind of explaining that. I know I've talked for quite a bit there, David. I don't know if you've got any questions or some bits you'd like me to clarify.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Jazz. You're explaining it very well, and thanks very much for relating it back to some of your education at De Montfort. Back over to you.
No worries. So the next bit I'm going to talk you through now. I'm going to talk through a practical example, which is not as grand as using autonomous robots. And whilst you do get to work on some projects like that, actually day to day there's kind of a lot of kind of smaller projects that all add up to kind of like a bigger thing. So I want to talk through that. So the practical example I'm going to take you through is some work I've been doing around discounting at Dominoes. So for a little bit of context, the majority of our orders are made with a discount, and it's a bit of a, everyone knows that you probably shouldn't pay full price for a Dominoes, right? Because there's great deals, and then we see that in the data as well. However, when we start to look at the funnel, so if I go to the next step, remember when we talked about early on, I said you always have to start with a problem. Well, you need some data to understand where the problems are. Otherwise, you're kind of using gut feel maybe. So this is a completely made up funnel that I've stolen from the internet, because unfortunately I can't share some real data, but we'll use it as just an example for me to talk through. So what's a funnel? So from start to finish, so on the left, the customer starts the journey, so they might visit the website, and then on the right, the last bit is that they've actually paid for something. So what we noticed around discounts was that actually the dropout between, so someone would come to the website, they'd find their store, they'd enter their postcode, they'd find the nearest Dominoes to them, they'd look at some food, and then they'd look at deals. And what we noticed was that there was a kind of a bigger drop between deals and checkout than we'd like. And we know that kind of once we get customers into the checkout, they're really committed because they're hungry, right? They've got this idea that they're going to get some hot, tasty pizza soon. So they're really motivated. So the bit that we've got to get them through is this deals experience. So this data highlighted to us when we looked at the funnel, we could see in the analytics, which measures, it's just a tool for measuring kind of customer behavior on our website and app. And that gave us the signal that there was a problem. And, so again, starting with that problem there, And this was great for telling us that there's a problem and there's an opportunity, because off the back of this, we could start to get a bit scientific, right? Because we can say, oh, if the dropout's this, if we improved it from X to Y, that means we'd have this many people going to the next step, and then you can start to add a commercial value against it. Now this is great, but it doesn't tell you why customers are dropping out of that step, right? It just tells you that they are. So the next step is putting your researcher hat on, really, which is starting to understand the why. So this is combining the qual data, so all of the behavior that we've, this is combining that quantitative data that we've got from customers using the analytics tools that we've got, which tells us how they're using the website and where the dropouts are. But again, we don't understand why. So we've got a tool called usertesting.com. And if you're interested in this world, they've got a great blog, and you can see loads of stuff about kind of how other people are using this tool. But essentially, this allows us to get our customers to go through our website. It records their screen and they talk over the top. And then, if we have a look about starting to understand why people are dropping out, well, if you look here, this is our current experience on the website. And as I'm scrolling, this is the deals page, right? And if you imagine you're really hungry, David, maybe you're trying to organise a party or trying to get, food for you and your family. You've got a bit of an idea in your head, kind of, I'll probably need this many pizzas, that kind of thing. I've got a bit of a budget. But what you're presented with here is a ton of information that's quite hard to digest. And as you scroll through, it's quite hard to figure out what is the best deal for you. And so we got a load of customers to go through this website, our existing website, and give us some feedback. And what they called out was that, wow, there's a lot of choice here. Which is the right one for me? And if I think back to the consumer behaviour module we did at DMU, that was a really good one as well, about understanding how customers make decisions. And I remember, there's a thing about choice paradox, right? Which is if you give too many people, if you give so much choice, it's quite hard for people to make a decision. And again, that's kind of, okay, well, that's one hint to why people are dropping out at that step in the journey. They also say, look, lots of the deals look really similar. It's not easy to compare and find what I want. And then they were also saying it's not really clear how much I'm saving. Am I really getting value for money as well? So out of this, we were like, right, okay, we've started to understand what the problems are. There's a lot of choice. It's quite hard to compare. So it's not easy to use. And there's a big segment of customers that really care about making sure they're getting value for money. And actually, when we digged into some of the other analytics as well, we could see that customers were going through multiple deals. And when we interviewed them, they were saying often they do that because they want to compare against competitors as well. And right there, we've got a problem. If we're not making it easy for them if we're not giving them all the information to make a decision early on, then there's a risk, and no wonder they're kind of potentially dropping out a little bit at this step. So there's the opportunity. So then what we'd do is go, okay, we've got that problem. We've combined the quantitative data with all the analytics, and we've now started to get this qualitative data. And now what we need to do is combine both together to shape the problem and start to think about the outcomes that we want. So the best thing to do is kind of have a goal that you can rally your team around to kind of solve that problem. So I would say our job is to make it quick and easy to get the best deal. So that, David, if you come on, you've got an idea of how many people you need to feed, who you're feeding, that kind of stuff. How do I make sure that you don't have to do all of that work to go and compare all of those deals and can quickly find the right one for you? And you go, great, well, that's a nice goal and that's something we can all get around. However, how do we know when we've solved that problem? So the next thing you do is you set out a kind of list of key results, for example. So these will be the metrics and the data points we'd look to understand if we've solved this problem. And here's some example ones. So you could go, okay, well, if we want to make it quick and easy to get the best deal, then actually that would mean that if we do a good job on that, we should see that deal funnel conversions, that step by step, we should see less people dropping out there. Making it quick, well, how are we going to measure whether it's quick or not? And that's about reducing the average amount of time it takes to add a deal to your basket from this many seconds to that many seconds. We also learned through the research, because we did some research with customers, but we also interviewed our franchisee partners. And there's some that would appreciate a bit of help about which deals to put up and how to better trade them. So actually, we'd have also a bit of a target about making sure that we're empowering them to do that. So X% of stores would kind of action and adopt the best practice guidance. And then lastly, going back to that segment of customers that were value conscious and that are going to do the comparison between us and our competitors, was making sure that we increase that value for money perception from X to Y, which is a bit of a soft metric, and we use some like customer surveys to measure that over time. But as you can see here, like 1 and 2 are quite hard metrics in terms of commercial metrics, and 3 and 4 are kind of a little bit softer, and they're the kind of quality metrics to make sure that we're getting it right. So now we've got a framework, right, for here's the problem that we need to solve, and we've got an idea of where we need to get to say, yep, job done, we can move on to the next problem. Then what you do is you go away and you ideate around it. So what we do is we spend a lot of time, we do a lot of really rough like wireframes and sketches of what we think the customer experience might look like. And then what we have to do is we have to go through a process of prioritization, right? Because we're not going to be able to solve all of those problems in one go. And just using something simple like a value versus effort scale, you know, can be, you know, there's other methods to prioritize stuff, but often, you know, some of the simple stuff is the most effective. And basically what we ended up with, we had a load of ideas that would be in various areas of this map. But if you look at the kind of the bit that often you might want to start off with is this on the top left, this high value and low effort, which really is like, why aren't we doing this now? We did come up with a range of ideas. Some of them included some really interesting ways of like asking you, okay, what product, like how many people are going to order, what's your budget, that kind of stuff, and having a bit of a quiz and then recommending deals to you. There was other bits around how can we use the data we know about you. So for example, David, if I know that you've never spent £30, more than £30 at Dominoes, why would I bother showing you a discount for 50% when you spend over 40? Because chances are you're never going to spend £40 if you've been an existing customer for, you know, 12 months. And then that way we can start to reduce the choice. Some of the challenge with that is there's a lot of technical complexity there. And again, going back to my principle early on is that you want to deliver value early and often, is we actually had a chunk of stuff that was in this high value, low effort column that we wanted to start chipping away at. So I'll talk through something that has just gone into test at the minute. So if we go back to this customer feedback, which was lots of the deals look similar, it's not easy to compare and find what I want. So as you can see here on the left, that's where we've got our existing experience on the website. And through the ideation, we came up with an idea of just, let's start small. Why don't we simply list out what is actually in a deal so customers can quickly compare? And what we did was we built this experience on the right in a prototyping tool. So we didn't have to spend time on development, that kind of thing. And we got that in front of customers. And we kind of put it in front of 20 or so customers. And the majority of them said it made it a lot easier to compare and contrast. So we were like, great, right, we think we're onto a bit of a winner here. So then we used a tool called Optimizely, which allows us to A/B test different designs against the website. So if I cast my mind back to, you know, we learned about this in the, can't remember which module it was, but it was something to do with digital marketing and whether, you know, best practice about A/B testing direct mail. So you send one version to this customer, another version to that customer, and you compare the difference. It's the same thing. So doing it online, but at scale. So we put this in front of 50% of the customers that visit our website. So we could see how did this perform better than our existing experience. And that came out really positive. So the metrics, so conversion was increased, and also the amount of revenue that we were getting from this part of the journey went up as well. And that gave us a lot of confidence then to go, right, we can go off and we can put it live to 100% of customers. I'm just going to quickly round off this bit here by saying, going back to this is about thinking like a scientist. So we started off with, we believe, so we had a hypothesis right at the top here, which was we believe that if we clearly present what's in a deal on the first step of that experience, it will be easier for customers to compare and select the best deal for them. And then what we did is we went away and we tested that, right? So we went away, we created designs, we got some customer feedback early on, and then we put it in front of real customers on our website to get that data and get that confidence that if we put it live, the metrics were going to go in the right way. Because what you don't want to do is just use your gut and guess, and then if conversion drops or your revenue drops, you're going to have a lot of angry stakeholders internally. So once we had that test idea, we said, well, we'd measure the deal dropout, we'd measure the time taken to add a deal, going back to trying to make it easier for customers, and we'd also reduce that average deal builder views per session. So that is people looking at multiple deals, basically going back to that idea that we had feedback from customers that were bouncing in between deals to try and compare and find the best deal for them, and also compare against competitors. And then we defined some success criteria, which was, we know, well, our hypothesis is right if the deal funnel dropout reduces from X to Y and it results in an overall positive conversion rate increase, and also the test results result in an overall positive revenue uplift. Because I think the thing to watch out is you can make a change and you might have one of you say conversion rate, and the amount of people dropping out could go down, could improve, sorry. So great, your conversion rate's gone up, but actually you could be making less money because people are spending less.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if you've got any. Sorry, I know I've gone through a lot of content. I don't know if you've got any questions.
No, not at all, Giles. I think that's brilliant. The process is absolutely spot on in terms of from a systematic point of view of going back to core principles and relating the issue actually in a scientific kind of format. And that's fantastic. Jazz, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. I wanted to finish off just a few minutes. So from your background and experience, both as a placement year student, but also graduate jobs and moving direction and moving really your trajectory, what tips and hints would you give to final year students on choosing their graduate job, on deciding on their route?
Sure, great question. So, really in the ideal world, you'd find something that you're either, you've got a bit of direction, right? Like I had early on, that I was kind of, okay, I was really interested in advertising, social media. So I worked really hard to get an opportunity to get some experience in that field, which I did through my placement year. And it turned out that actually that wasn't the path that I ended up taking. But the fact was, the biggest standout there is just trying to get some experience in that area early on. Because whilst you're young, right, you can make these, you can figure out stuff. It's great to make mistakes and figure out where you want to go, and you've got the time and the opportunity to do it. And I think don't put too much pressure on yourself as well. I think a lot of the culture today is there's a lot of kind of like hustle culture, work kind of like crazy hours, and you've got some people that are super driven, and you look at some people that go, I've got a really set, like I've got a 5-year plan. Actually, I'm the type of person that has never really had a 5-year plan. I've ended up, it works for some people, doesn't work for me. I've gone with the flow. I've gone with, is there stuff that I'm interested in? Does it excite me? And I've just kind of followed that really. And I've kind of ignored, I suppose, any external expectation of what I should do. I didn't worry too much about what my friends were doing, and I tried not to compare myself too much to them as well. I've just kind of tried to find my own path. So the biggest tip is just try and get some experience. And obviously it's always chicken and egg, right? Because it's like, how do you get experience if the job market stuff and you're struggling to get there? If you can go and offer your services and you can make money off it, great. And you can start that way. Awesome. I would say potentially most controversially, it's okay to do some work for free, providing that it's on your terms, and obviously someone's not taking advantage of you. But what I mean by that is, if you think, for example, if you're interested in, I don't know, working on digital marketing, for example, there's lots of struggling local businesses at the minute with COVID. If you've got some spare time, you could time box it. You could say, look, actually, I'm happy to spend a week with you. Could I go away and build you a Squarespace website? Could I set you up a Facebook page? Could I use some free tools like MailChimp to do some email marketing for you and help you build up that customer database? And what that would mean is that you can then have something to talk about in interviews. And I think that's the critical thing, because when someone sits in front of you, education is important, but it's how you apply that and how you've applied your learning. And I always like to find out, how do people think and how do people approach problems? How do they work? What's their thought process? And often the only way to articulate that is to talk through a project that you've worked on.
Brilliant. No, that's absolutely fantastic and right on my lines, Jazz, with offering the small bite-sized bits of your experience and skills. Um, just going back to a point you mentioned before, so you touched on LinkedIn at the beginning of your presentation. How important do you think it is for final year students to have a good LinkedIn profile?
So I think it's really important that you've got a good looking LinkedIn profile, especially just outlining your experience stuff, because it's the new CV. A lot of applications now, you can just hit that one-click apply and go through there. But most importantly, it's obviously a tool to advertise yourself and your skills, and you can share content and your thoughts and opinions, but also it's a great tool to do some research. So what I mean by that is, if you've got an idea about look at the jobs that you want to go for, and if you're struggling to get interviews, or you're not really sure whether you want to go for that type of job or you want to work at that type of company, you'll probably be really surprised at how helpful people are willing to be, especially to graduates, right? And you've got that card to say that you're starting out in your career, and everyone's a bit of a sucker for that, right? Because you want to help people. There's lots of people that have helped me, so I'm always happy to repay the favor. The worst that someone will ever do is say no to a message or request, or actually they might just ignore you, but you might find a couple of people that are in the field that you want to get into that will say yes, and they will happily share a couple of bullet points, point you in the right direction, or even get on a Zoom call and speak to you. So just don't be afraid to reach out to people. I know it can feel awkward to begin with, but again, the worst that will happen is that they'll just ignore you or say no. The best that will happen is that you get some great advice from someone. If there's anything you can give back in return, like your own time, if someone's going to invest some time in you, then great. But yeah, just don't be afraid to ask, is what I'd leave it on. Brilliant. For that question.
Brilliant. And very last thing for you, how important are marketing technologies, both from a creative and you mentioned about Squarespace and all the other different platforms. How important do you feel as though marketing technology and design technology is for students?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because sometimes it's quite hard to get experience with these type of tools until you're in a job that you can really utilize them at scale. So when I talked about Google Analytics and that funnel, obviously it's great when you can work on a big website like Dominoes where you've got millions of customers visiting and you can do loads of cool stuff, but how do you get started? One thing you can do is, again, like if you've got an idea for your own small business, you can just try out this stuff yourself. Just give it a go. Like there's loads of free tools. So, mess around with Squarespace, create a website, have a look at, okay, well, now I've got that website, how am I going to market whatever products I'm selling? Through maybe like owned channels, like for example, like CRM, so email marketing. There's a tool called MailChimp that you can hook in, and you can just have a mess around and just practice and set up stuff, through to doing some stuff on social media. Like create a Facebook ad account, doesn't cost you any money. You can have a look at how it's set up. You could, imagine you're setting up an advertising campaign for a client. So here's an idea: if you're going for a digital marketing job, if it's like an exec entry level kind of role as well, go and look on YouTube, because there's loads of people that provide guides on how to use these tools. There's courses on places like Udemy that are often really cheap, and sometimes you can get them for like £10.99, and they'll be really in depth about how to use Facebook advertising as a tool, for example. But wouldn't it be great if you were going for an interview somewhere and it was a digital marketing role? And again, what am I going to talk about in that interview? Well, you could have gone on to Facebook, the Facebook advertising suite, and you could start to create some example campaigns, and you could get your laptop up and go, look, actually, here's kind of how I'd approach it and that kind of thing. And do you know what? Early on, if someone did that in an interview, they'd probably knock my socks off about the fact they've gone to that effort to do it. And it's all about that. Having your education at uni gives you a really good foundation. And then the bit that you need to get is some of that practical experience using these tools, and so you can talk about them.
Brilliant. Jazz, that's been absolutely fantastic. Is there anything you want to finish off by asking me?
Oh, that's I wasn't expecting that question, to be honest. I don't know. The only thing is there. I suppose I would just say that if anyone's interested in anything that I've talked about, and are keen to learn a little bit more, obviously you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy for you to share my LinkedIn details, David. And if you get a few questions, if you could collate them, I'm happy to spend a bit of time as well and just share some stuff afterwards.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Jazz Blakeston Petch of Dominoes, thank you very much for that, marketing expert. That was fantastic. Thank you.